What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down the, I think, over 1,000 players that got cut today and highlight the ones that you should be focusing on in case they don't get brought back right away on practice squad. So, if you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Make content like this almost every single day. I just dropped a mock draft last night, so feel free to check that out as well. It has trades in it, so super exciting. It's the first of 2025. Let's get right into this. It's going to be a lot of content today, so keep that in mind. It's going to be fun, though. Starting off with the Arizona Cardinals, this is going to be thanks to Ari Mirov, but I just want to go over the guys who I think are more notable than anything, because if you go player by player, there's a point where, there's a point where you kind of get exhausted. If there's 1,000 dudes, there's not going to be 1,000 dudes analysis needed. And feel free to bring your own guys in there. If I end up skipping a guy that you really like, give them some representation. That's what the comment section is for. I always say be a dick, just don't be a dick about it. But starting off, the notable releases / cuts of the Cardinals, which yes, a lot of these guys could end up being guys who end up being signed to the practice squad, but at the same time, they're also targets for other teams. Desmond Ridder, literally the second quarterback taken in 2022. Notoriously for me, I think he was quarterback 7 that year. Was not a fan of him. I had Brock Purdy as well as, Bailey Zappi. Those are the guys who were right in front of him. Carson Strong, I think, was right behind. It was like those two were kind of piled together. But obviously, somebody who I wasn't necessarily super high on, but I didn't really think they were going to be like cut worthy. And especially after, it's been pretty much a season and a half out now, he was somebody who was taking legitimate starting reps. So certainly interesting. Michael Carter as well. I love Michael Carter. To me, he was one of those guys who I really loved at UNC. I'd be surprised if he isn't brought onto a roster. I think that being put on a practice squad would be kind of criminal for Carter at this point, but it is what it is. Other names of note, Chris Barnes, I don't mind him at all, especially for the Cardinals. I think he's going to be returning on a practice squad and then filtering in as the season progresses. Marquise Hayes is a solid backup offensive lineman. Naquan Jones, I believe he's from Michigan State. Honestly, pretty quality defensive interior. You got Miles Murphy, who I'm pretty sure, forgetting what his name is, but ended up saying that it was a Miles Murphy from the Bengals and caused like a lot of strife, and we were like, oh crap. But it was this Miles Murphy, depth interior defensive lineman, but more so the story of the fact that for about like 5 minutes, we thought that actual first round pick Miles Murphy was the one who was ended up being released. But Tyreek Smith, pretty sure, back in those Ohio State days, he was actually quite solid. And, him being a flex edge rusher, especially with all the injuries, it kind of sucks to see that he hasn't really panned out. And Sage Surratt, Wake Forest legend, is also somebody who I honestly really do love to see in the UFL, and I think he'll continue to dominate there, probably over the NFL. But continuing on for the Falcons, Bradley Anae is someone who I still have a little bit of faith in, so I definitely think that he's worth bringing back on a practice squad at the very minimum. Austin Stogner, shout out to, he ended up going to prom with one of my friends because he's from the Dallas area, so it's kind of fun. But, never really thought of him as somebody who should be sticking to a roster. He'll be definitely somebody who I recommend on the practice squad. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up wanting to go to a different team's practice squad. If he goes to the Saints to pair back up with Spencer Rattler, since they were both friends, even though at the end he ended up going away from South Carolina with away from Spencer Rattler at the end. So I don't know if there was anything that ended up dividing him there besides the fact that he wanted to be closer to home. But other names of note, so far, nothing too crazy. Zion Log ended up being brought on. I think, he was a 6th round pick this year. Might have been a 7th, but he was, if I'm not mistaken, my least favorite pick of theirs. I just did not like Zion Log. It is what it is. I have a very similar opinion of Log as I do to who's coming up this year. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, which is funny because he's somebody who I'm very much against. I see even in first round mock drafts, but another defensive interior from Georgia. But yeah, not a fan overall. Tommy Togiai, and mentioned, he's right here for you guys. Tommy Togiai is a really solid defensive interior for depth. I would not be too surprised to see him on a roster. Probably will end up being practice squad, but don't be too surprised if he ends up being on roster. Cruikshank, honestly, he's been floating around. Not a bad practice squad guy either to be pulled up in case of emergency. Ravens, Russell Gage. I mean, it sucks to see the career trajectory. Russell Gage, he was somebody who, like, coming out of Tampa Bay, really red hot, right? And also the Falcons. Like, there was a lot of optimism there, and just hasn't really fully lived up to what he was supposed to be, which, that just sucks. It sucks to see guys, whether it's health or just regression itself, not be able to live up to that overall hype, or just at least not be able to live up to what they're supposed to. And it sucks for them as well, because that's money that they lost because of situations that probably are outside of their control. But for the Bills, they ended up cutting Frank Gore Jr. That's probably going to be a practice squad guy. Granted, I do think it could be very easily claimable. Watch out for the Niners, because, the Niners are always that type. And if they pick up Frank Gore, who did really well in the preseason, I mean, don't be surprised if he just comes in randomly in relief and just ends up kicking ass. I mean, I wasn't that high on Frank Gore Jr., but I was definitely higher than where he ended up being acquired. If I'm not mistaken, it was a UDFA, which I definitely thought he was worth, I believe, a 5th round pick based on my grades. So definitely a good acquisition there. Surprised he honestly got cut. Lyle Collins as well. He hasn't really been able to do much, but he's, veteranship, offensive line gets injured all the time. He'll eventually be on a roster. He definitely won't be sitting on a practice squad the entire year unless, some injuries are kind of beating him up and not allowing him to reach that potential. Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler, both bigger names from the past. I think both 2nd round picks as well. I think that maybe in time when the Bills have a better vision for what they're going to be doing, these guys are both going to be practice squadded, and then maybe they could be elevated at certain points. Deion Jones, former Pro Bowl linebacker, his career just kind of took a big tank, but it's just somebody to, especially if injuries start popping up, keep a note on. Ben DiNucci, the quarterback that I ended up saying was better than Trey Lance when they faced each other in the FCS championship. That was somebody who I obviously don't think is talent-wise better than Trey Lance, but at the same time, he ended up outperforming him, and to be fair, both of them aren't doing too hot, so it doesn't really matter, does it? Damiere Byrd, solid depth guy right there. Certainly somebody who could potentially be swayed away from a practice squad to be, signed at the very bottom end of a roster. Other guys of note, Will Clapp got released today. I saw a lot of people really feel bad about losing the Clapp. That's not something I would have said a long time ago, but as of today, things change. But not for Will Clapp's sake. Daquan Hardy, definitely somebody who had his impact moments here and there, but at the end of the day, he's young. I think that he's going to be someone who could be re-signed. But Deon Cain, one of those dudes who I just continue loving regardless of the lack of production. It kind of sucks to see him not be able to really make a roster. And then Justin Shorter, someone who I really fell in love with, had a ton of hope for with the potential, especially in this receiving core. For me, if I'm as a Steelers fan, I see Justin Shorter here, and I see the lack of depth in our receiving core. This is the perfect guy, 6'4", smooth route runner, and just brings a lot of really solid bones to the table, and I would personally really want to take my shot with him. Trey McKitty, former 3rd-round pick tight end from L.A., also released. Certainly somebody who had some really solid route running ability, and you could see that some other teams very well might want to take a swing and bring him on because tight end is not the most populated position in the NFL. Panthers, Terrace Marshall Jr., the big name. Again, as a Steelers fan, I'm pretty adamant on wanting some of these guys here. So definitely somebody to keep note of. But besides that, Jordan Matthews, he's been bouncing around the NFL. Felipe Franks, Falcons quarterback legend. He was always fun. I think he ended up playing in the Shrine Bowl and didn't do too shabby either. But definitely worth mentioning. I don't think he'll ever actually make a roster, but definitely somebody for the UFL range. Could be somebody to make a little bit of a career recession? No, a career bounce back. because I'm forgetting the actual proper terminology at the moment. But continuing on, Michael Strawn, he's somebody who ended up doing some really good things there for Indianapolis. And, you see that on certain teams, guys can make big impacts. On other teams, they might be non-factors. So keep an eye out for him, maybe returning to a practice squad for Indy, because they definitely were able to use him very well. For the Bears, Brett Rypien in the Hall of Fame game did phenomenally well. Austin Reed was somebody for Hard Knocks, somebody that a lot of people loved. But Brett Rypien, sucks to see him. I think he's definitely going to be practice squatted and then probably elevated from there. Kari Blassingham, I think that is going to crush my guy, David Miller. So shout out to him. He's a Bears guy. Colin Johnson, just somebody who definitely is going to be either practice squatted or he's going to be brought back. It's just somebody who I really did appreciate after especially I think in the Hall of Fame game, he had a drop that, was pretty significant and then ended up coming back and making some key plays. And that's, being able to bounce back from your mistakes to me is a very key trait that I'd be looking for in having players on my roster. So I would hope that, the NFL sees him in a similar light, because I was really a big fan of what he did there. But anything else of note? I don't really see anything else crazy here. Again, feel free to shout it out in the comment section below. Micah Baskerville, cool. But I think that there's other linebackers I've mentioned that are a little bit more on the talented side that I would be more considering. Bengals, Jackson Carman. He was pretty much a disaster this preseason. I'm pretty sure he had 5 penalties in one game. As an offensive lineman, if you're not brand new to the NFL, you do not have an excuse for doing something like that, and there's a reason he's gone. But he's still somebody where he has a lot of experience, the tackle and guard. You could try to get a little bit of that juice out of him that was there in Clemson. Hakeem Butler, he's definitely probably going to be going back to the UFL in due time. He's going to be someone who was a superstar there. I think he was a USFL superstar, and somebody who I still have some faith in. What was he at Iowa State? Pretty sure. I remember that year. It was Hakeem Butler and I'm forgetting the other guy. But he was from, I think, South Carolina. Was it South Carolina? No. But regardless, it was Hakeem Butler and then another guy that were the two bigger receivers that some people thought were first-round picks and just didn't end up going that way. But sucks to see them, at this point of their career. But it also is a unfortunate testament to the fact that every player that we end up watching in college has a very strong chance of ending up career-wise like Hakeem Butler over, Antonio Brown, so to speak. Antonio Brown was a weird one just to pop into my head. I could have just said DeAndre Hopkins or something that hasn't been overly plagued with some controversy. But at the same time, you get what I'm saying. It's unfortunate, but only the exceptions become exceptional, because that's what exceptional means. And it is what it is. But continuing on, other names that I like to note here, Nate Gilliam. It's not somebody who I'm going to be dropping everything for, but it is what it is. Shaka Hayward, again, I could have far better names to mention here, including Trey Hill. Trey Hill is actually a really good developmental center, in my opinion. It's not like he's going to ever get reps for you. And, it's not like the Bengals are at the altar when it comes to basically being able to have good offensive lines. They're not the precipice of offensive line development here. But at the same time, there are players like Carman and Hill that have very untapped potential. He's super young coming out of Georgia. So I'm very excited to see if maybe he could end up having another bounce back. But anything else of note for this team? Aaron Casey, not bad. Pretty sure he was Indiana. Just a high floor player that could end up being someone you could elevate if need be. For the Browns, you got Siaki Ika, which I'm famous as saying you can go down to 7-Eleven and find a fat guy, and it solves the same thing. I feel bad personally for for saying it in that rude of a light. I was very, very abrasive when it came to Siaki Ika. I was very confident that he was absolute ass. And I always say I'd rather be wrong about players I don't like, because good football is better than being right. Unfortunately, sometimes, fortunately, I got to be right about some of the guys I don't like. And this is one of those instances. He was pretty ass, but he's still a space eater. There's teams like the Rams, for example, that could get some nose tackle depth that maybe can retool Siaki Ika and then make him actually what he was supposed to be as a third rounder. Deontay Foreman, he's been somebody who continues bouncing around, but continues to have those flashes at that size with that speed. Like, he does bring a really, really solid foundation to the table as a rotational running back there. Jermaine Ifedi, just again, another guy who's been bouncing around, nothing going to be special, but at the same time, if you want somebody with experience, it's sometimes better than plugging in somebody who doesn't even know what the hell they're doing. James Prochet, pony up, SMU. He's somebody who's also bouncing around plenty of rosters. This is a team where you'll be seeing wide receivers get cut that shouldn't really be getting cut. And same thing with special teamers, so to speak, like James Prochet here, because of the fact that the receiving core and the weapons on this team are very, very stacked. So you're going to be able to see a little bit higher of a standard for what they keep. And so also it keeps a higher standard of guys that they let go. So Prochet, Darden, both of those guys with respective legitimate reps that you can end up acquiring for pretty much free. But continuing on, Wyatt Davis, he's been somebody that unfortunately I wasn't the hugest fan of him coming out of Ohio State. I thought that, back when he was a first round pick, I wasn't a big fan. When he ended up being a third round pick, I was totally in favor of it, and it just sucks that it just hasn't panned out for him back when he went to Minnesota. Pretty sure I think that was the Kellen Mond and Wyatt Davis picks. That's, oh man, in retrospect, sometimes picks just don't work out. Fionn Hicks, remember that he came out a little while ago, and my buddy Caesar Williams, one of the first guys I ever brought on the show, was his cornerback running mate there. So interesting little side note there. Not saying that Fionn Hicks is really a big guy to note, but at the same time, it's kind of more fun for me to have that little flashback, so to speak. Isaiah Thomas, Oklahoma edge rusher, just a higher floor type of guy. Definitely going to be a practice squad dude. But, is it going to be for this team or is it going to be for another? That's the big question. Jawan Briggs is a little bit of a kick in the nuts. I mean, it sucks to see him not make a roster, but for those who are claiming that the other Cincinnati defensive interior, which again, my mind's mush. I worked for already a 10-hour shift today, so bear with me on this one. But Jawan Briggs is far superior to even that talent that some people try to put in the first round, and then he's not even making a roster. It sucks because Jawan does have that gap penetration ability that I really do love, and I do think that teams should be making a heavy push, especially teams like the Cardinals that do need to get some defensive interior help. I think Jawan Briggs could be one of those that was a massive, massive oversight. Shout out to Lorenzo Thompson. I'm pretty sure, forgetting where he's from, but it was some really, really small school. I think it's Rhode Island. He ended up having some highlights, and he had some really good footwork. A little bit on the lighter side, but still, honestly, just more of a fun note than anything. For the Cowboys, they got rid of Carl Lawson. They brought him pretty late in, so it's kind of hard to believe that he was going to be someone that they kept long term. But it's essentially they're testing him out because of Sam Williams being out for the year. But maybe somebody that they bring back and elevate, and as they try to work some other stuff out. Definitely someone to keep an eye on, though, because he used to be someone that was viewed very, very highly, and hasn't really lived up to that because age, unfortunately, is a real thing. Time will be the ruler of all of us. We can't control it, and it controls us. Fehoko, pretty sure he's number 93. He actually played a lot of reps this preseason. I thought he showed really solid get-off and impact at the line of scrimmage. This is definitely somebody to keep an eye out for. Again, teams who need some defensive end support, like the Cardinals. I'll just continue bringing them up because I think they depleted their defensive line and then they didn't replenish anything. It's definitely a team that I would recommend Viliami for, because I could see him being in a legitimate rotation. Josh Ball, if he could hit his girlfriend, then, he can hit a defender. I don't know. I can't come up with a good comeback for that one. But regardless, Josh Ball is someone who is very feisty, both at the home and on the field. It's why he fell in the draft, is because he had some abuse allegations. But, hopefully that's all over. Fingers crossed. Regardless of the fact, though, the team is good enough to where they don't really need that depth. He's going to be a practice squad guy. Snoop Connor, got to see him in person, and same thing with Royce Freeman, Malik Davis. Like, these are some good backup running backs that certainly could be Sniped. Kelvin Harmon, that's the guy I was talking about earlier. I was trying to think of like who was there with Hakeem Butler. Is Kelvin Harmon. I actually ended up going to, so I trained at a place called Sports Academy that is actually then renamed Mamba Sports Academy after a famous deceased athlete ended up buying it. But Kelvin Harmon was one of the athletes that trained there. There was a lot of guys who ended up training before the draft. It's kind of what they used to do. Rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. He was one of them that was there. Greedy Williams was there. But, Kelvin Harmon was also one of them. Got to see him play a lot. Of course, I mean, I forget to mention that Quinn Williams was the only one from that group that really did succeed. But still, worth bringing it up. But it's just a cool story there. Jalen Cropper had some good moments there. Race McMath, somebody who's going to be, he has a lot of speed, so he'll probably be a gunner that gets brought on to a practice squad, maybe elevated for some special teams work. Preston Fant had a couple reps here and there that were quite solid, so maybe somebody worth developing. Besides that, Nick Vigil, cool. But we'll continue on here to the next team, which is the Denver Broncos. Tim Patrick was the big one. I mean, obviously, he had 2 years where, he really didn't play because of injury. And he's back. He had a really solid preseason. They tried to trade him and get some draft capital. They weren't able to do so. So he's going to be a hot name in the market. Not going to be able to be signed back to a practice squad. I can almost guarantee it. Little Jordan Humphrey, not a bad choice for the practice squad for potential elevation. Samaje Perine, goal line back. There's a lot of them out there, especially some of the ones I've already named, even for Dallas, that I might take over Samaje, but still a very, very solid option. Michael Burton, hard to argue with him. He's been really solid as well. So, I mean, they're getting rid of some really talented weapons here overall. David Sills even had some moments. Pretty sure he was on the Giants, and he even had some pretty big moments there. Not like actually game-breaking moments, but comparatively to what we think of them today. Calvin Throckmorton, Sam Mustipher, both of them quality backups, probably like quality third stringers. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, all right? But, both of those guys worth at least having on a practice squad to be able to elevate. Philip Dorsett, he's just had a pretty rocky career. You've got Trent Gilcutt as well. But continuing on from there, I don't really see any other names. Thomas Incoom, Central Michigan outside linebacker. He was a stat machine, definitely going to be brought back on a practice squad. I don't know if he really earned the right to be someone that is a priority and like brought onto another team, but he definitely someone who I would bring on for development. Same thing, Darrell Shawmy from Maryland. He was a physical freak, 260 pounds. So continuing on, we got the Detroit Lions. Nate Sudfeld was the backup quarterback there for a while. Could be someone that is targeted by other teams. It's a good sign, though, that Hendon Hooker, third-round pick, is someone who could end up acquiring that second quarterback job, though. Donovan Peoples-Jones, this dude's been pretty much, playing yo-yo in terms of being on a roster and not on a roster, but this is a dude who I thoroughly believe should be getting reps, so I think he'll be back. I think that they're just doing this for roster reasons, like roster sizing, and they're probably solving some other things at the moment. I think Donovan will be back, and then he might even be getting some good reps there. But Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight's just a quality dude to have on a practice squad. He's going to be floating around for the majority of his career. Jake Fromm, same thing as well. I mean, obviously, a lot of us even thought of him as like a third-round pick. Ended up slipping past that. Jamar Jefferson, I mean, he was somebody at Oregon State, had a phenomenal career there. There's just too many running backs that have that home run hitting ability. I don't really think he separates himself too much from the crowd, but definitely somebody that still could capture the heart of some of the people who have loved him before. Tight end wise, this is actually the bigger kick in the nuts in my opinion, but Zylstra and Mitchell, both of them I actually quite like, and James Mitchell especially. I was really hoping for James Mitchell to even be able to be a tight end too one of these days. I highly doubt that both of these guys will go non-practice squatted, or even for Mitchell, I don't think it would be a bad idea to consider him as a 53. Do I think that the body of work justifies it? No, but a little bit of my insanity and hope for James Mitchell kind of helps, guide that to where I think that he does have a really good potential to be somebody who could be special. But continuing on, I mean, special in terms of the value that you're paying to get. Like, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I like him, but not that much. But looking at the corners, Javelin Guidry, he's had some moments, but Stephen Gilmore is someone who I absolutely would heavily emphasize. And remember when I was talking about the Browns, it's a higher floor for where you have to be in order to be on the squad. The corner core was heavily revamped, so you're getting rid of a lot higher quality corners than maybe some other teams. I highly doubt that some of these cornerbacks, especially these three here in Wild Goose, Guidry, and Gilmore, will be easily practice squattable. But at the same time, a lot of these guys get comfortable. They also buy houses in certain places. And, when you're getting paid, I think, what is it, like, forgetting how many thousands a week that you get, but it could be just a cushion enough salary to where you feel pretty comfortable with that. But continuing on, don't really see any names that are too crazy. But the Green Bay Packers, Sean Clifford as well as Michael Pratt, both of them had their respective moments, but with Malik Willis's acquisition, it makes sense that they'll probably be bringing back Michael Pratt on the practice squad, but we'll see when that is all said and done. Samori Toure, I think that he's someone who is very underrated. I really do like his game, so definitely somebody to keep watch on. Jalen Wayne, cousin of Reggie. I didn't really love his game coming out, but sometimes the name really does add some juice to the energy of the room. And maybe he's going to be, I can almost guarantee you're going to see him on the Colts. If they don't really bring him to the practice squad, he'll probably go to Indy just because of the fact that, Wayne is a pretty big name there. But continuing on, Luke Tenuta, LaCesar Smith, Royce Newman, all three of these guys do have a solid foundation of talent from college. I do think that there's somebody who will be more so priority in the practice squad realm. But continuing on, you look at some of these linebackers, not really too crazy. Robert Rochelle, Kalen King. Kalen King's going to be brought back onto the practice squad. This team's just too damn deep at a majority of these positions to be able to keep these guys. And especially with the new contracts they had over the offseason, I think Kalen King's going to be, he could even be brought on to a team like the Steelers. If I'm the Steelers, I'm getting this guy in a heartbeat because we need corner depth. And you get that Joey Porter Jr. connection. I don't know if he's going to be able to come back to the practice squad, but you guys should hope that he does because I do still have some faith. It's just a weird year for Kalen King. I don't know what the hell happened, but Anthony Johnson Jr. as well. Really quality safety available right there. You might end up losing, unfortunately, a couple of them. Noah Brown, probably going to go back to the Cowboys with their wide receiver depth needs for the Texans. I definitely think that he has wide receiver 4 at the very minimum written all over him. CJ Henderson, I heard that there's some personality concerns with him, but regardless of the fact, this is a team that's loaded with backup cornerback talent, including some starters, but they're still trying to figure out the depth at their cornerback position with a lot of different guys. So again, that standard is higher. Definitely somebody to take some swings on. Ben Skoranek, loved him out of Notre Dame. We'll see what happens there. Same thing with Quintez Cephas. This is another team that had so much wide receiver talent that you're going to be able to get really good wide receivers. Andrew Beck, solid fullback as well. Jawar Jordan and J.J. Taylor, both those guys have had their respective time in the sun, so to speak. We got the clone of Ben Skoranek on this team as well. But you got Tegan Quitoriano. I think he was a Shrine Bowl star. And definitely somebody to keep your eye on for sure. But this team had a lot of really solid talent. McTelvin Agim, dark horse there. That's super underrated. He'll probably be brought back, especially with the defensive interior being relatively weaker. Someone who could get elevated from time to time. But Ollie Gay as well, LSU guy, to have some good foundational depth. Desmond King's this dude who plays yo-yo on this squad in terms of being on versus off it. I do think that he'll end up being someone who's a valuable guy to bring back. Troy Pride as well. Lonnie Johnson, again, just a very versatile defensive back, safety, but also a corner technically when he came out. And continuing on for the Colts, let's not go overboard here in terms of the analysis because there's 1,000 players here, right? Ronnie Harrison, big hitter. I think that he'll definitely be on a squad. Greg Ward, Eagles legend. Jannard Avery has some talent to him for sure. I really like Tyreek Cleveland at Florida. Derek Rivers, take it or leave it. I don't know if he's going to make it back on a squad. RIP Laquan Treadwell. This is a hard team to make the receiving core for, so I respect it. But if you're looking between Jalen Wayne and Laquan Treadwell, at least one has a little bit more of a connection to your city. Jason Bean, Kansas legend as well. Not somebody who I think is going to do too much impact, so to speak, on the practice squad market. Demetric Felton, he's had some moments for sure. Definitely somebody to consider because he also has that return ability there from UCLA. Evan Hull, I really did like him out of Northwestern. So I think that that's somebody where you're going to be considering him or Samaje Perine, so to speak. Eric Johnson, I think, is extremely underrated. I totally believe that he's going to be on a roster. He ended up showing up on the Senior Bowl a couple years ago, and I really do think that there's a lot to love about his upside in his game. So very, very underrated there. So continuing on, though, Jalen Simpson, sucks to see him not be able to succeed, but he was a later round pick. It's bound to happen on a team that has a lot of talent. For the Jaguars, you got Terrell Edmonds, CJ Beathard. CJ's going to be sticking back to a practice squad, and that's just what it is. He's just that quality of backup. But Edmonds and Amos, both of them, tenured safeties for teams that like to be able to get some depth and some foundation. Both those guys should be on a roster. Denzel Mims just has not been able to meet the quality standard that a lot of teams are looking for, unfortunately. Josiah DeGuara, same thing. Breland Speaks, he was doing really, really well there for the UFL. So I think that he's going to probably go back there and kind of be the defensive face of it. But you look at Trey Flowers as well, not bad, but there's a lot of cornerback talent out there at the moment, and I don't really know if he passes it. Tyler Shatley, consistent, but not really a great offensive lineman. Definitely more of that depth guy for sure. Looking at the rest of the dudes, anything of note, Josh Proctor, he's had some moments here and there, but nothing really too surprising. For the Chiefs, you got Kadarius Toney. That's the big one. He'll definitely be an attractive guy to be able to claim, and we'll see what happens there. But, a team like the Steelers could be one to be able to use him properly that, is looking for someone to have as a run after the catch threat, because that's what he did so well at Florida. Justin Ross, I think he'll be brought back to the practice squad for the Chiefs and then re-elevated. They're just going to continue playing yo-yo with him. Irv Smith, he's had even a lot of starting experience, so we'll see if that ends up maintaining throughout this year, but maybe the time has finally come for that. Ian Book, Saints legend, nothing really special about him. Kelvin Joseph, former second-round pick. Was he originally at Kentucky or LSU? It was one of the two. He swapped from one to the other, but a lot of untapped talent there. Could end up being an attractive pickup for another team. But besides that, not really seeing anything that I want to comment on. The Raiders, the GOAT, Nathan Peterman. I don't even know if he'll be bringing him back, but it's still fun to bring him up. Britton Brown, Zach Charbonnet on, not on steroids, but, if you're looking at the Dollar Tree clearance section, you're going to be getting that pretty much. And the funny thing was they worked together in that same backfield. Sincere McCormick, UTSA legend. Jalen Guyton was a big surprise here. I think he should be brought onto a squad. Health concerns certainly could be a reason why he is not maintaining on this roster. But at the same time, Guyton, Milne, those are dudes who are certainly worth having. And the very minimum on your practice squad, but for Guyton, when healthy, he is pretty damn awesome. Shout out to my high school Oaks Christian, Alex Bachman. He was someone who ended up going there. So got to give some love where we can, right? Zach Gentry, Steelers legend, was not a fan when he got picked. He's just kind of a bigger dude who I don't think ever really panned out the way that you'd ever want him to. But looking at other offensive linemen, Will Putnam, quality interior offensive lineman, probably a third or fourth guy. Ellerson Smith and Snowden, both of them 6'7". Just very hard to be able to develop guys like this that just are raw and then have a very freaky frame. But Ron Stone, definitely someone with high motor. Could see RJ ending up being on a practice squad and probably going to be on the Raiders practice squad, a team that has a lot of edge talent. So it's a team where you might be wanting to snipe their edge drops. So continuing on, though, Sam Webb, he had his moments. Man. Nothing like crazy. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but I've seen some flashes from him. Could be someone who ends up being attractive. For the Chargers, Donald Parham, it's the new regime. Parham actually meant quite a bit probably to Chargers fans when he ended up starting to show something. Isaiah Spiller should be a hot name on the market. from Texas A&M. He was really, really solid. I thought he was very underrated, and I think he's getting very disrespected. I thought he was better than some of the backs they brought in the offseason. Leatherwood, still someone who's bouncing around, but somebody who will continue to be sought after, and see if, maybe he can end up carving himself a backup role somewhere. Cornelius Johnson will definitely be practice squatted because that's his coach. It just makes sense. Isaac Rex, shout out to BYU, like 4 years ago. He was really, really entertaining and just ended up falling off a cliff. Barnhart going to be practice squatted as well. Jared Clark, injuries, man. Back when he was at freaking Coastal Carolina, like, he actually had so much potential, and I just don't really think that the health-wise he really translated properly to the NFL. But Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, not bad. Shaq Quarterman has some potential, but I'm not really seeing anybody of legitimate note there. For the Rams, Boston Scott, he's already being looked at by the Steelers, apparently. He's already being brought in, so that was going to be a hot name on the market. Very, very tenured, especially as a special teamer. Really good back, no doubt. He definitely someone who will come in clutch. Zach Evans, someone who I still think the Rams should have prioritized. I don't like the fact they went after. What's his name? Forgetting the freaking running back, Blake Corum. So I think they should have given Zach Evans a better chance. Miller Forrestall, shout out to Bama, but never really thought that much of him in the first place. Looking at more, Drake Stoops, pretty sure he was an Oklahoma legend. Big fan of what he did for us on Saturdays. Alec Lindstrom will definitely be practice squad at the very minimum. O'Shawn Mathis, he was tenured there out of Nebraska and TCU. So I would not be too surprised to see him back on the practice squad. For the Dolphins, Eric Ezukanma will definitely be a hot name. He's someone who's good after the catch. Didn't really think that much of him, but still someone who did have that after the catch ability and with some good athleticism there. Other names to note, Neville Gallimore. Pretty sure, wasn't he like a 3rd round pick by the Cowboys or something, but, Oklahoma legend there. It's worth taking some swings on defensive interior, especially for this team. Nick Needham, he had his moments, man. I mean, he has some good tenureship to him, so could be a hot name as well. But other names to note, Anthony McFarland, he's not going to make it back on this team. I mean, they have a billion guys like Anthony McFarland. But continuing on to the Vikings, Lewis Cine, painful to see how far he fell. People were celebrating Lewis Cine not succeeding. It's like, as much as I want to cherish Siaki Ika being ass, it's like, it still sucks. I don't really like the fact that people get excited to talk about people for not succeeding. And Lewis Cine, it's like he broke his leg in the first year, man. I mean, we don't even know if he was able to. Like, maybe in an alternate universe, he really could have reached that potential if he had that development. But Kenny Nwangwu is going to be a really highly sought-after special teamer, really, really athletic. Matt Corral, shout out to my high school, Oaks Christian, former teammate. He's definitely somebody who will be brought back on the practice squad, most likely for the Vikings, because it's worth taking the shot. But Myles Gaskin, also, he's had some very good moments throughout his career. Someone who could be a really high-end backup. N'Keal Harry, not finding a groove, and unfortunately, I don't think he will. Robert Tonyan, someone who will definitely be practice squatted. He's been a starter for multiple teams. Well, he's been a starter for the Packers, and then he was a rotational guy there for the Bears. But Nashawn Wright, not a bad choice to be able to bring back on as a practice squad guy at the very minimum. Andre Carter ended off his preseason with a couple of sacks. I love that for him. Someone who unfortunately busted out, so to speak. And then Jacqueline Roy sucks, but he's also somebody who didn't really meet the expectations. Malik Knowles is really fun. I highly would suggest a team to be able to bring him and Dwayne McBride at the very minimum onto their practice squad. Shout out to Mo Ibrahim. He was fantastic there at Minnesota, just injury after injury, and then older age just kind of got the best of him. And that's pretty much it for them. New England Patriots, Zappe should be someone who's highly sought after, really high-quality backup with actual starts and actual production. He's going to be someone who definitely gets brought onto a team. Maybe the Vikings got rid of Matt because of that, but that is yet to be seen. William Bradley King had some moments there in Washington. Steel Chambers, sick name, and honestly, he's just a little undersized. Probably will be practice squatted and developed. Besides that, Kellen Diesch, he's been bouncing around as well. Not bad for depth. Continuing on for the Saints, Equanimity St. Brown had that special catch from Spencer Rattler. Definitely somebody who will be bouncing around practice squads at that size and with that speed. You got Jonathan Abram, excuse me. He's a big hitter, someone who will definitely be on practice squads as well. That's just what he's going to do. He's going to be floating around. James Robinson, he had some moments there in the preseason, so I do think that some teams might be very interested in what he still has in the tank after doing so well for Jacksonville. But continuing on, anybody else of note, Stanley Morgan, shout out to Nebraska. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? But, Josiah Ziram from, I believe, UNC, quality backup. Same thing with Shane Lemieux. Like, you got some dudes who might be intriguing for some practice squads here, but I am not seeing anything too crazy. Joejuan Williams, former second-round pick out of Vandy. There's certainly some guys there, but nothing too crazy. For the Giants, Allen Robinson, I've been saying for the Steelers to be able to go back after him. I know it's not the same system, but, at the same time, we really have Jack, and Allen Robinson still is somebody who is a quality veteran for good mentorship of other receiving talent. Darnay Holmes, shout out to Darnay. We ended up playing him when I was back in high school, when he was over at Calabasas. But he's a penalty machine, probably going to be a practice squad guy, unfortunately. Jimmy Morrissey, shout out to the Raiders for drafting him out of Pitt. Josh Kelly, loved him out of Tennessee. He's the guy who's the epitome of contact balance. Continuing on, you got Breon Borders here, Christian Holmes. You got dudes who have legitimate names. So definitely names to keep an eye out for going forward, but nothing else of note. The Jets, you got Kendall Sheffield here. Al Blades, for that matter. Nothing crazy, but I really like Jalen Key. He had some flashes. Definitely a guy who I'd bring back on a practice squad. Abina Eze, I ended up calling him a fat ass back in the day, so apologies for that, buddy. But at the same time, not somebody who I have a very fond opinion of. Former Memphis tackle. And then we're looking at right now with Anthony Firkser, someone who at Tennessee actually had some pretty good moments. Zach Kuntz, he should be a red hot name. Talent-wise, like RAS score, this guy's through the roof. Definitely somebody for teams that are looking for someone to make an impact. You should be doing it ASAP. Deion Jackson, he's not going to, there's too much running back talent anymore. But Jalen Twyman, Pitt legend, just ended up being part of that draft cycle where randomly the Pitt players just tested out horribly. Continuing on for the Eagles, Ross and Campbell, one of these guys was bound to be cut, unfortunately, or practice squatted. One of them will probably be practice squatted as well and maybe elevated when the need is there. Just a really, really crowded receiving room. You got Zach here, but I also have already ended up looking at this one specifically. You got Job as well. Some pretty noticeable corner talent there that also has special team implications. EJ Jenkins, a lot of people thought that he might even make the 53. So certainly interesting to not see him on there. Will Greer, Will Greer is somebody who's going to be a continual practice squad guy. Max Sharping, he's somebody who also, I don't even know who Kevin Foolish is, but guys like Max Sharping will have some developmental upside. Tyrion Davis-Price, was not a fan of it when the Niners selected him. Unfortunately, I'm correct about that. Oren Burks, you might see him go back to San Fran. And Nick Gates, Matt Hennessy, like really solid depth offensive lineman here, but we're going to continue. I'm going to skip Julian Okwara because, he's someone who will continue to float around. But you got Gottlieb Adeze. You also got, where's Dylan McMahon? That's a surprise, but he was also flagged as a potential medical guy. You might end up seeing him back in the practice squad, but he easily could be snipeable. He's a 6th-round pick at offensive line in a pretty deep interior class. So a lot of depth at an offensive line that has seemed to kind of be pushed to practice squad at the very minimum. Gabe Hall, someone who had a lot of pass rushing potential. Taron Jackson, really solid as well. Already talked about Josh Jobe, Terrell Lewis. Kendall Milton even had some moments there. Joseph Ngata. Apart from getting shut down in the first game by little stick bug Nate Wiggins, I thought he did a pretty damn solid job. I was quite surprised to see him being a guaranteed release. I was hoping that maybe, you could talk about him as someone who could be a flex on the 53 because of the fact that he continued to do better and better. But, the writing's on the wall when you have that many talented receivers. It's not that big of a surprise. It's more of a letdown. Brandon Smith, just someone who I'll continue to have faith in, regardless of the fact that, he hasn't shown anything, but still someone with a lot of talent. Caden Stearns ended up claiming him earlier on, saw what he got. Didn't really get much out of him. For the Steelers, Quez is fucking ass, so I'm glad that he's gone. LaMichael Pirine was one of my draft darlings in one of the first years I studied. He was like a 5th rounder to me, though. Like, it's not like it was that special, but still really like what he brings. He's probably going to be someone who you bring back on the practice squad. But, besides that, Des Fitzpatrick was listed as like left wide receiver 2 for us. It's kind of weird to see that be cut. Same thing with Jacob Copeland. Like, both these guys are listed, unfortunately, very high, according to our lads. So we might be seeing them be brought back. Kyron Johnson, very, very athletic linebacker / edge rusher out of Kansas. We'll see what happens with him. Same thing with Jacoby Windman. I'd like to develop both of those guys. But continuing on, John Rice Plumlee, back at his days of Ole Miss with him and Matt Corral. That was very fun, but I do think he's going to be more of a guy to have on the back burner at the very most. But besides that, nothing really too crazy in my opinion. For the Niners, Ben Barch, someone who has experience. Robbie Anderson. I'm not going to call him Robbie Chosen. Sorry, not going to do that. But Robbie Anderson, he'll continue floating around based on his size and speed. Chris Hubbard, just a lot of veteranship, probably will be brought back and put on that practice squad for elevation. Same with Brandon Parker too. Trent Taylor. I mean, there's a lot of guys. Logan Thomas as well. Tracy Walker. A lot of dudes with a lot of experience. Rocky Sin. Tanner Mordecai. Shout out SMU. But you are absolute cheeks. We were so happy when Preston Stone ended up coming in. Cody Schrader. Danny Gray. Shout out SMU as well. Like, there's a lot of really solid talent that got cut from the Niners that easily could be sniped. Cam Latu as well. Former 3rd round pick. And I actually liked Cam Latu. He just didn't end up developing, which is a surprise. You'd really think that under, really good tight end group, you'd expect that. Jarrett Kingston needs to be sniped. Same thing with Drake Nugent. Like, these two guys, they need to go. I'm saying that right now. I hope to God you guys can't bring him back on practice squad because both these guys are way too talented to be, just not claimed by another team. Samuel Womack has had his time as well. Last preseason, he was red hot. There's the clone of Cam Latu and Cam Latui. And then you got Matt Breida in there, Keyshawn Vaughn. Like, really good players that ended up being cut from the Niners. Seahawks, PJ Walker, writings on the wall. D. Eskridge, hurts, but he's going to be brought on by another team. He ended up bringing back a 72-yard punt return. And then George Holani, fun to see him there as well. Aesop Winston, even mentioned as well. Sterling Shepard for the Buccaneers, definitely someone with a lot of experience. Also somebody who hasn't been the most healthy throughout his entire career, so he hasn't been the most consistent, but still worth bringing up. Other names of note, not seeing a ton when I'm going down this list. A lot of guys who I think should have been cut. Unlike the Niners, Kalen DeLoach, she was just like 220 pounds. It's kind of tough to have a linebacker at that size. I think he'll definitely be practice squatted. And besides that, not really a huge fan of any of these guys. So, the Buccaneers ended up cleaning house and did a good job at it. Titans, Caleb Farley, that just sucks health-wise. He was supposed to be super duper special, Pat Surtain level. Just health is a real factor. Kyle Phillips, someone I really like from UCLA, really good player. I think you could talk about, it would have been great for the Titans. I would have thought that he works well with the Callahan system, but you could even see him going to Cincinnati as a backup. I would really like that fit for him. JoJo Doman, flexible slot corner linebacker hybrid. You'll definitely see him on a squad. Tay Gowan as well, super high motor. Mikel Jones, what a career what college career he had in terms of like the potential to be a 1st round pick and then just oof. But continuing on, you got Khalid Duke here, not a bad player. Cole Spencer of note, but Kiaris Jackson will definitely be brought back. He's super duper agile, and I do think that he's going to be somebody that the Titans like to be able to test out going forward. For the Commanders, Martavis Bryant, shout out to the former Steeler legend himself. Hopefully he can continue to get back on track. Ricky Stromberg, former 3rd round pick. I wasn't a big fan of Ricky, forgetting what the pick grade was that I gave for that, but if I ended up giving a good one, feel free to roast me in the comments. But, I always don't like hurting teams for investing in offensive line, and it's kind of weird. Even though he wasn't good, it's like this team sucks in the offensive line as it is. maybe you can get that breakout. It's like, it's hard to give up on a third rounder that early. Hartman and McSorley, both of them probably going to be practice squatted. Both of them are really quality backups. James Pierre, Steelers legend right there, probably also someone who could be a potential target there because he's had legitimate starting reps. So Anusium as well, another guy who has some really good experience, especially for this corner core. I'm surprised these guys didn't really have more of an impact to be able to make it to the roster. Cole Turner, it sucks to see him go, but again, it's a tough league out there. You got to be really damn good. Kyle Blue Kelly didn't even make the squad, but we'll get to him in a second. But continuing on, you got KJ Henry, who he had some moments as well. He'll definitely be practice squatted at the very minimum. But Kyle Blue Kelly, just mentioned him. And, Sheldrick Redwine, Chris Rodriguez. I mean, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint. These guys could all be guys who could take some reps during the regular season. So for the Commanders, I could see a lot of them being practice squatted with the hopes and like the reliable or the higher chance of being elevated. Certainly do see that being a legitimate potential there. But that, also shout out to Mitchell Tinsley, because you guys know I really do like Penn State. But that is going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. It was a long one. We went over 1,000 players. But I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.